No, it's interesting, and I really don't know. I mean, it's one of these things. I mean, obviously, I'm interested in it, but it had when I was like deep in the throes of kind of like really thinking about it, especially when Mary and I were going back and forth such a great distance from Detroit to the Upper Peninsula. It was like, well, I really could like maybe imagine like I fall asleep in my autonomous vehicle in Corktown. I get in there at 10 p.m. and fall asleep, and then I wake up in Calumet the next day, and I've been safely transported. And like, what could that do to like change my life and give me a better quality of life? I guess it's not really that overly compelling per se to have something like that, right? It's like one of those things that might be fun to like think about, but would you actually like do that in your life? I don't know. So I can't say I've got a fully baked thesis either. So I'm curious about,
Yeah, yeah. One of the curious things there is like autonomous RVs, right? Like an RV is such a lame term. Like I'm just it's like recreational vehicle. It's so municipal. But like a house pod that can drive itself, perhaps electronically, instead
yeah,
of on dyno juice, and just like teleport you across the country in comfort with your Chef Boyardee in your bed. Like that's interesting. And to see these sort of dock up together and make communities. And I mean,
yeah,
remote work, like what we're doing right now, talking and having this conversation through the computer, wasn't possible that long ago. And it's
yeah,
amazing, and it's magical. But what if AVs and EVs and everything can meld together to be this I don't know, this greater national and global community? Sounds crazy out there, but I think like those are the edges where we're really going to find transformation, is that kind of stuff, and also making it accessible through a subscription or a borrow service. You shouldn't own an RV. They're just expensive, bad machines, but like
right.
experiencing them, they're very fun and joyful to be able to like wake up to a mountainside, and not have that be your house. Like I think people will always seek flexibility and freedom. Like we're always like arrows towards freedom, and we can experience short periods of bondage where we're
Yeah.
stuck in these crappy dead end jobs and stuff, but we're always going to go towards some kind of freedom.
What was the so I mean, a lot of interesting stuff in there too. I mean, one I think is like just the form factors on vehicles and how to get around that. It does seem like there's a little bit of like a Cambrian explosion, at least brewing for this kind of stuff, right? Whether that's either super tiny cars or like the more mobile housing like you're talking about, or the robot that delivers food, or the drone stuff. There's just a whole world, I think, that breaks out of like traditional like
Hmm.
car and bus delivery, just because the form factor can be so wildly different, but still sort of like
Hmm.
please you. And that's a whole different conversation about like human living patterns. Like, what was that movie that came out a couple years ago? It was about the seasonal Amazon workers. It won a bunch of awards. It was called like
Oh
called
yeah,
Nomad. Was it
yeah,
Nomad?
yeah. It's about the older folks in RVs that would move to. They'd
Yeah,
go on vacation and they'd kind of shack up at these Amazon warehouses to stuff, Beanie Babies into boxes. Yeah.
yeah. And I actually found that not that I would like to live in that specific scenario of the seasonal Amazon gigging and whatnot, but it just struck me that this ability to move seasonally around the country is actually a very natural human thing too.
Hmm.
Another conversation that I want to have on this series shortly is speaking with somebody who's an expert in kind of mapping and collecting all the information so people can see where the native nations in the U.S. lived and who they were and what their territory spans were. And one of the essential misunderstandings, this is too big to say like in a small space, but when America was settled by Europeans, there was this kind of thought that like nobody really lived anywhere, so it was okay to like take the land. But really, what people were
Hmm.
doing was seasonally migrating to the most optimal places to be, but in
Hmm.
ways that very much had to do with ownership and stewardship and everything else. And so, like, not to take your RV comment too far on that, but like that
No,
would be a
no.
fun way to like change our roads and even change the expectations of where you could park your house and stuff. Because I love living in one place, but you also like to travel and do other things too, right? So it's all part of that big weird future we're talking about.
Well, it's a
Um,
lot of what I'm thinking about lately too. Is that right now you buy a house, you sign a deed, you're basically you're signing up for this giant subscription to the city, county, state, and
yeah,
country that you live in. And so as things become more flexible through coordination efforts of Uber and Airbnb and whatever, like I think there's going to be more of those. Um, we have the greater chance to be stateless. It's sort of one of these fringe things about like Bitcoin and Ethereum and such. It's like once money moves to not be connected to a single state, then you get to choose what state you're a part of, not state in the US sense, but like what what
Sure.
government are you subscribing to, and you can be quite portable. And so right now there's not a lot of competition for states. I'm not looking at other countries and going like, maybe, like I'm, very much here for a lot of reasons. It's where I grew up, it's what I know, but also like, we've got this big defense military thing around us. But what happens when people become more portable, either physically through, cool RVs that might drive you around the country, or also just monetarily, like you're free politically from stuff. Right now, there is a lot of difficulty in being an American. Like you travel and people are have a lot of opinions about your country and what it does. And all of a sudden you're like, I didn't do that. I didn't make those choices for the thing the country did, but you're paying your taxes to do it every day. So this is quite a tangent, but I think as we become more flexible, we're going to go back towards slightly more nomadic, financially, politically, geospatially, like we want to move to where what best suits the moment.
I'll believe almost anything now because so many things are changing at the same time. There was a period, I don't know if this resonates with you, but I'd say like, and this is just my personal thing. And of course, everything changes when you're younger and you get older and stuff. And my kind of observation was like, man, I'm looking back in the recent past and I'm seeing like how much change happened in the 20th century, industrialization, building the first cars to begin with, road systems, mass migrations of people for jobs, things of this nature. I look at, look at the world wars, look at the 1960s, all of the social change and just tumult that was like self-evident and visible. And you kind of like grow up in this period where you're like, not that there hasn't been, crazy stuff that felt like there were big changes, but like, sort of like the hate, like the early, like more mass internet years, 2000, I'll call them like, 2000, 2003 through 2015. It was sort of like, feels like we're doing a bunch of futuristic stuff, but everything kind of like feels almost like the same. Like it's almost like we've locked everything in. And it's really been like within the last few years for me personally, I'm like, okay, yeah, the singularity is happening. A whole bunch of crazy stuff is now all this like all these capabilities that we built up that hadn't been used are all like bouncing off of each other in unpredictable ways. And they're just really challenging the way that things have been done for a long time, just institutional assumptions and everything else. So I'm with you. I don't have a more articulate thing to say about it in a short period of time, or maybe even a longer period of time, but you're right. I mean, it makes an exciting time to be alive and a scary time to be alive and an opportunity filled time to be alive, but also one with like non-obvious opportunities too, because
we're difficult at perceiving the abstract. This perceiving, talking about, documenting the abstract is very difficult. Like I can look outside my window right now, which I keep doing, and I've got a canal back there that's been there 100 years. I've got a house that's been here 100 years. I've got a road out front that's named Jefferson because it's named after Thomas Jefferson, probably. Like everything in my physical world.
The land grid for the entire U.S., right? Your square mile grid, so it all ties back.
Right. It's all been formed a very long time ago, and it would be nearly impossible to change even a single parcel in this grid. Like it is very, very locked in. Now you can join parcels or split them apart, but like you're not changing this grid. It is done. You want to found a new city, great, but you're not going to change the layout of any major city, barring a massive fire or something. They are the way they are. And so then you look at that and you go, this world isn't changing at all. This world is exactly the way it's been. But then all of these abstract things are changing so quickly. Like in a year, nothing changes, but in 10 years, everything changes. And like right now it's 2022, which is just a wild number to say, actually, still. Like it's very odd to me. And what's 2032 going to look like? It's probably going to physically look a lot like this. The canal is hopefully still going to be there. This house will still be here, but everything else, all the meta, how we discuss things is probably going to change. I probably won't be a little rectangle on video with you, probably some kind of wild telepresence thing. I mean, I've got a VR headset sitting behind me. Right now it's kind of a toy, and things that seem like toys now are generally going to be the modus operandi of the future. But right now it's like the silly thing that I like wave a lightsaber around in, Yeah.
One of those VR experiences is going to get into your brain, even just like a little bit in some new way, and something is going to shift. I don't know what that's going to be like, but
it's happening. So every day I'm competing with, here's my dead. This is how far technology goes. My charger's in the car. So my Apple Watch is dead. But every day I get a notification on this watch. that my friend Derek has completed a VR workout every
Okay.
single day, 7 days a week, because we're like competing digitally. And he burns some 700 calories, and he always plays the exact same game. It's called Supernatural. It's on the
Okay.
Oculus, which is now Meta. I hate that name.
Yeah.
But he completely he stopped going to CrossFit. He stopped doing his rowing. He stopped doing all this other stuff, and he only plays the VR exercise game because it's supposedly it's friggin' amazing. He
Yeah.
jumps through triangles on a mountaintop, and he does it so regularly. And now the device is there's no wires. It's just you just grab it and do it and go. And so all of a sudden, I thought VR is this silly toy that really won't. It's Betamax. It's not really going to reach dominance. And then
Yeah.
wait a minute, my friend is using this thing literally every single day of his life.
Yeah.
Like that is a seismic change, and it's going to go from nothing to hey, Derek uses this every day to like holy crap, everyone uses this thing every day. And so then where does the land
Yeah.
grid go? Does it matter that I'm in Detroit or Tuscaloosa or Manhattan? Like, does place become less physically important? And therefore, transit and Ubers and self-driving cars are the solution to something that we no longer care to solve very much. I hope not.
This is probably too far out, but a good way, to like probably like culminate in the freewheeling style of this this series I want to start. But that's actually I'm in the camp that like my thesis for why the oh god, Fermi's paradox, why you don't see other life in the universe yet. Even though it's so big and has been around for so long, you're probably not the first, group to do this, is that you just end up going into inner space like that. You know what I mean? You just become more content in some way. It's not VR like Oculus per se, where you're staring at graphics on a screen, but like, why go somewhere else eventually if you really hit home on that? So that's but that conversation to be continued at another time. I guess to just to kind of like wrap this up, is there anything else that you want to share? Anything else that you're doing that you think people should know about, or just something particularly interesting that you want to say while we're wrapping?
Well, so I'll just boom through a whole bunch of things real quick here to give people some context. So I started all these small businesses. I got offered a job to be the head of marketing for the software company called Basecamp. It was a wonderful experience. I did it for 2 years. There was, you can Google about it. There was a lot of big changes there. So I left the company. I decided to resign to come back to entrepreneurship, to small projects. And during all of that, we experienced a global pandemic, which is still ongoing. My bus company, which relies on selling tickets to people to go and be together, obviously couldn't operate.
Andy, I'm sorry, I totally forgot to ask you about the elephant in the room. There was the fact that you had to pivot when people could not be with other people. So
No, and it's okay. So we made this hand sanitizer. I mean, this is actually a little prototype bottle we made here. So we switched. The FDA made it so that you can make hand sanitizer legally as not a pharmaceutical company. So we got into that. It was largely successful. It was crazy. And this entire arc that I'm telling you right now is going towards, I'm thinking more and more about a product agnostic team. Because originally I bought one school bus and we provided bus service and all was well. And then that was taken away from us. And all of a sudden we couldn't operate buses anymore because of a pandemic, and rightfully so. And so then we make this hand sanitizer, and almost all of the people from the bus company started making hand sanitizer. And then after hand sanitizer, we started making software, and people call us and, are you calling us to rent a bus or to buy your bus OS for your company? You get the same person. And so I think as work becomes more abstract, more meta, a little stranger, I think that we've got greater opportunities to be product agnostic as far as the things that we offer to the world. We all get to be these slash people. I'm an entrepreneur, but I also drive race cars and kayak and make films. I'm surrounded by filmmaking equipment, and like I'm diving into like, what does VR mean for a silly little bus company? I think we're all able to hit way above our weight class now. And to some people that can be really unsettling and unmooring and quite scary. But if you're on the bottom and trying to come up and don't have a lot of turf to defend, it couldn't be a better time for flexibility and autonomy, and to like lean into that. Like, I think this is the time for the generalist. I think really the people who are the many-hatted will succeed now, hopefully.
Interesting. I feel like the the trick there, this is just my like gut, my feeling of just having similar inclinations, but then like building something that's really like hit like a growth trajectory where it's like, whoa, we got a lot of responsibility to a lot of customers,
Mm-hmm.
is like solving that like reliability on customer support for any one of those
Mm-hmm.
things that might work, or finding it a home. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you build something that's like, oh, this is working, how do you do the handoff on that properly? Do you know what I mean? Just so that it continues to be supported. Because I think you're right. I mean, there's like, there's so many like stable organizations that are capable of producing so much more innovation than they do, but they don't, because I think it's just, you're like, how would we support it if it worked? So that cracking that nut, right, where it's like, what's the ghost kitchen of customer support for something that that an experiment that you did that worked? I don't know, just crosses my mind when I think about that, because
the long-term carrying cost. I mean, that's like the Byzantine generals problem, right? It's like the more experiments, therefore the larger my domain is, the cost of maintaining this entire nation organization gets larger and bigger. I think that the duality is you have to understand when to cut projects off and when experiments are done. I mean, the hand sanitizer experiment, it went up very, very quickly. I mean, we went from I had one drum that I was mixing up with like a plastic paddle to buying a tanker truck inside of a couple months. I mean, it was a massive thing, and anything that grows that quickly and that virally almost certainly has a matching down curve on the backside. Like, of course, the big hand sanitizer companies in the U.S. were going to increase production and fill that demand with this very, very, very cheap. When if you walk into a Home Depot right now, you can get a gallon for $1, maybe 99 cents, because they're trying to get rid of all of it. I knew that from the start when I subscribed to this thing. So there will become a time, we still sell it online right now, arsenalclean.com, but there will become a time when we just need to say this project is over to clear the decks for the new things, And I still have lots of people emailing me wanting to do. We had a motorcycle race called Thunderdrome that was very fun and cool here in Detroit, and I want to keep doing it. The audience wants us to keep doing it, and they come to the bus company to ask when the next race is going to be. But you have to clear out all that stuff to seek the new thing. I probably have 14 LLCs in my name still, maybe 15 now. And it's a complex, weird world, but I think this is the direction work is going, for the people who are ambitious and want to keep driving. And there's always a flip side to it. If you maniacally focus on something now, that is probably pretty rare in this universe of slash people. So lots of ways to succeed. No one way.
Hey, the grass can be green on all sides, right?
It's a grass orb.
but this is, if it wasn't already clear, I would definitely say, Andy, that's, in my opinion, that's one of your best attributes, in addition to just being a good friend and a generous person, is that you are an excellently organized like brainstormer and project maker, right? So if anybody ever wants to like brainstorm or sharpen their saw with somebody, it's fun to talk to Andy about it, because it's a rare mix of like business sobriety with like creative thinking that can resonate in a social setting or in a marketplace, and stuff that has the potential to work, thought of like off the cuff quickly and routinely. So good on you for all that.
Thank you. Yeah, once you can't really like test an idea until you put it out into the world, so like standing up a little tiny website, like I used to love LaunchRock, which you can make like a very simple sign up site for, and you just like scramble something up and put it out there. I remember you put together Unicorn Diet, which is credit union.
Speaking of scrambled up, that was my one like LaunchRock, because I was interested. This was going back quite some time too, but like the potentials for getting the permission to start your own bank through the vehicle of a credit union, and just all the things you could do, like, or at least the creative space, if a group of like open-minded people got the keys to letting people store money, give loans, what could you do? And and there was it was fun. I didn't do anything with that, because again, like many projects, like, hey, do you want to do this? And it's like, who has time of the day to start a bank, even if it's not that hard theoretically. It's but yeah.
You were onto something though, because like look at what's happening with crypto and DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. Like essentially everyone had that, not everyone. A lot of people had that ambition, like how can we like unscrew this financial system? Like how can we make this something that's people focused instead of these it's the same ambition behind the bus company. It's like, yeah, we all want this thing and we're willing to do it. Like people want to ride it, people want to provide it, like it's a thing. But there's something in the way, which is like someone setting that flywheel in motion. So I think you were onto the right thing, but using the old tools, whereas other people went, well, let's make some new tools. I mean, the reason why Vitalik built Ethereum was he was upset they nerfed his World of Warcraft character, and was like, why are things mutable on the internet? Let's make immutability through code. Because he was upset about his Warcraft character. Like, I think it takes these very small frustrations or slights, and they could turn into huge things. Like you're like, whoops, I built a massive lever.
Yeah, well, you get, but a whole new set of mistakes to make too. I remember one of my favorite quotes, sort of grim, but it's the invention of the ship is the invention of the shipwreck.
Yeah.
Just meaning like, right, like the new thing has its own thing. Also, I'll point out Unicorn Diet as a name. It's definitely a charming one to me. That came from I when I'm trying to come up with names, I'll often just type words into anagram generators just to see if you can rearrange letters. And Credit Union actually anagram Unicorn Diet, which is where that one came from. I was so happy when I saw it, because usually it's like total nonsense, and I was like,
yeah,
Unicorn Diet. Okay, well, we'll go with that for a code name. But so Andy, just like wrapping up here, you have any quick suggestions for me as I try to do this? I mean, this is definitely my plan here. Is when we're done, I'm going to cross my fingers and pray that the audio sounds halfway decent. I'm going to cut off the beginnings and the end on stuff. I might have it like transcribed, just use a service to have that done. But do you have any thoughts or suggestions, like either guest types or just formats, like, tips for me as I try to make this a regular thing?
The only thing I tell people with this kind of stuff is just be interested. Like, one cannot be interesting. That's like it's like, be cool, man. Like, you become very
I'm only going to cut you off here, which is funny because it's sort of counter what you just said, because now I'm going to try to say something interesting. But as I was thinking of names for this series, I recently heard a podcast by a guy named Oren Hoffman, who's the CEO of a company called SafeGraph, who we have a partnership with and we've done projects with and who we like a lot. And he interviewed Jack Dangermond, who's the CEO and co-founder of Esri. So biggest GIS company in the world. And he asked Jack for what business advice would he give? And I think I'm saying this right, that he said like he's only got like one piece of advice, which is be interested, don't be interesting. And, it's exactly what you're saying. And it was funny because one of the names that I thought of for this, and I thought it was maybe a little too, maybe it's actually the right one, was Don't Be Interesting. Because I kind of felt like if you had a interview to listen to and the title was Don't Be Interesting, like what kind of prompt is that for the guest or for anything else? But it would be the flip side of like, no, be interested. So I don't, that was very random. That's where you went.
That's a funny coincidence. Yeah, I normally find the shows that I'm most interested in, like I've been listening to a lot of The Knowledge Project with Shane Parrish. Like you're really just sitting there he's asking the questions that your brain is coming up with. Like, yeah, what about this? And trying to jump into like the logical fallacies and the gaps and the thinking, like, do you just want to go down the rabbit hole? Like you're looking for the depth in someone's knowledge and maybe not the breadth. So those are really the best shows, and asking the questions that you would ask in a bar setting at 3 a.m, not the press release questions. I think that's just the main thing. Yeah.
Okay. I'll try to carry that with me. And the working title that I have right now you're making me think that it should just be Don't Be Interesting, in the spirit of be interested. But so I joined a curling league this year, as you are well aware, and as well as my wife, Mary, our co-founder and COO at Regrid, is because I talk about it more than people like to hear about it, because it's just such an interesting, weird and new game to me. And I learned this expression from curling where I was like, where was this in the English language for me earlier? Because it has such a nice like flexibility of meaning. So in curling, every time you throw a rock down the sheet, you're really trying to do something specific. It's not like bowling, like you're doing specific things in bowling, but it's much more like, I'm trying to do exactly this, exactly bounce off this one, exactly land in this area. It's not go see what happens. So there's a term when you don't make the shot you were intending to make, but the outcome isn't bad. Your teammates will say good result. And so and sometimes we'll say more or less passive aggressively. sometimes it'll be like, good result. And you're not really happy about it because it just means you messed up and you got lucky. But sometimes people are genuinely happy because like what happened was like, it was a tough shot and it was a good result. So I was thinking good result for like the prototype name on this is something like ambiently positive, but also like, I don't know exactly what's supposed to happen. So it's like, hopefully it's a good result, you know? So that's where my head was at.
I like that your ambition is to use a passive aggressive name for your show.
But a positively occasionally passive aggressive. Now I wouldn't use it in the passive aggressive sense, but it is a funny thing to like, you know, throw your stone and try to like get something good to happen. And your skip, who's like the person who's calm and shy, is like, yeah, good result basically means like you screwed up, but we're not screwed, is sort of how that gets.
Yeah, that mirrors really well Annie Duke, Thinking in Bets, the great writer. She talks about a habit of resulting where you judge your decisions based on how they turned out, based on having good decision hygiene. So a lot of people will make a decision and it turns out poorly and they went, oh, I made the wrong choice there. And frequently, no, you actually could have made the right choice and it turned out poorly because of extenuating circumstances. And then the flip side is also true, that you can have a good result, but it was actually a terrible decision you made and you just got lucky. She's a psychologist, I think a psychologist, and a poker player, which is a fun combo, you know, so very similar.
No, I appreciate you bringing that up. There's that quote attributed to Einstein, which he may have never said. It's one of those things, but that definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And my corollary is, you know, the world is crazy because you can do the same thing over and over and get different results every time.
Yes.
Not to a T, but you can try the exact same thing at different times, lose horribly in one, win wonderfully in another. The same thing in business, you know, and so that balance of like what actually caused that. But anyways, Andy, I appreciate you, man. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming up and visiting recently. And I will, you know, hopefully do a good job micro editing this and sharing it. And thanks again, man. Thanks for your friendship and for spending this time and just for being a cool person doing this stuff.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It's very pleasurable. Keep the boot warmer on for me. I will be back in Calumet.
Yeah, come up with Lisa. We're ready for you. All right, man.
Sounds good, man.
See you soon.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.